Revit software is no other than architect Onyema Udeze. Architect Onyema Udeze is an architect by profession, as you know. He is the co-founder of Blaze Incorporation, a BIM consulting outfit based in Nigeria. He is passionate about the application of technology-based solutions in the building construction industry across Africa. He is a creative writer. He authored the book, Essentials of Smart Building Technology, available in several e-book stores. I'm sure that we should check it out after this training. He is an instructor at LinkedIn Learning and Udemy. Wow. He is an Autodesk certified professional for Revit architecture, mechanical and electrical disciplines. He also an Autodesk certified instructor. In his spare time, he likes to read and create quality content on the internet. So we welcome Architect Ifeanyi to go straight into the practical demonstration of the Revit software. Thank you very much.
It's hungry.
Please let's all mute our mic so that we can get the best out of the practical session. Any question we have will be taken after. Thank you very much. Architect Ifeanyi. Architect Onyema. Apology.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
We can hear you.
Yeah, good morning. We can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. So I will just go straight into the presentation. Before I go to Revit, I will first of all do some slides, go through some slides to explain the concept theoretically before I go into Revit.
Architect Onyema, sir, there is a feedback like an echo. So I don't know. Maybe there is another mic on or you are using two devices. It's clashing.
Okay.
And also you are on your video, so I will be seeing you.
I don't need to on mic because you are the one that should on your video now. You are the one doing the training, so we only want to be seeing your face, sir.
All right, no problem. Okay, I don't know if you guys can see me clearly. I don't know if the audio is better now.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Yes, we can see you.
All right, so I'll start by sharing my screen. So basically what we're looking at today is the software called Autodesk Revit. And I also understand that some people are having challenges installing. So of course, this session will be recorded, and the whole idea is to introduce you to the concept of generating, doing quantity curves, and it is called schedules in Revit. So I'll try to explain it as much as possible. And since it's being recorded, you can always use it to practice. So the installation, like Dr. Sam mentioned earlier, can always be gotten from any of your colleagues, maybe architects. And once you install it, it's the same concept, irrespective of the version of Revit you're using. Once you understand the principle behind do quantity curve in Revit, it's the same thing across all the Revit versions. So let me hide this. Okay, so Revit schedules. Basically, the way Revit works is is one of the popular BIM software in the market. There are so many BIM software today. I'm sure in the previous presentation, the presenter have already talked about what BIM is and some of the software you find in the market. So Revit is one of those robust software. And the reason why it's very popular is because it's a multidisciplinary software. Within Revit, you have architectural tools for architects to create design buildings. You have tools for mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, plumbing engineers, or M&E engineers. They have structural engineers and what surveyors. So basically, it's a collaborative software that allows all the disciplines to design, and which is what the whole idea of BIM is about. So today, the focus will be on schedules, which is basically one of the underlying features in Revit. The reason why you're able to generate schedules in Revit is because Revit is a parametric software in the sense that every single element in Revit is comprised of parameters, whether it's a geometric element or non-geometric element. By geometric element, I'm referring to things like doors and windows and walls and floors. Those are geometric elements. And by non-geometric elements, I'm talking about things like spaces and rooms and areas and all those things. Even in Revit, those things also have their own parameters, and it can reduce all those parameters to a spreadsheet format, which is what schedule is all about. So basically, schedules are a list of elements and their properties within Revit model. So they itemize within objects such as walls, doors, and windows, as well as calculate quantities, areas, and volume, like I mentioned. And they can also list document elements such as sheets, keynotes, and views. And once created, they are constantly kept up to date with any changes that occur. So one of the major advantages of Revit is that it has this bidirectional feature, meaning that if you update anything anywhere, it updates across. So for example, if you move a door in your floor plan, that same door will update on your elevation. It will update across the 3D, the same on your schedule. If you change the manufacturer information of a door, that information will be updated
I hope the
automatically.
owner of the seat will not mind. Okay.
So it's a bidirectional software, meaning that whatever you update anywhere, even if you update something on your schedule, it will update on your floor plan, on your elevation and all that. So that's basically the way schedules work in Revit. So basically in Revit, all building elements have information about their properties defined within the model. You also have the option to include additional information with any element. So for example, by the time we start creating schedule, you notice that there are some parameters that you want to include in your schedule, but they don't come automatically within Revit. Revit allows you to create new parameters and add to your schedule. So that kind of makes it flexible. You can expand the parameters you have. For example, let's say you want to generate the quantities of doors in a building, and then you want to indicate which of those doors have security feature in them, which of them allow you to come in using biometric or access control and all those things. Such kind of parameters are not natively available in Revit, but with that feature of allowing you to create new parameters, you can easily add as many parameters as you want. And we'll look at others by the time we start doing the practical. So for example, does have properties like size, material, fire rating, cost, and so on. All this information can be scaled and quantified, and you can even add more to it. So when it comes to Revit, by the time we start the practical, I see that there are 6 major types of schedules in Revit, and each of them are tailored towards different use cases or purposes. The most popular and the most common one is what's called schedule and quantities. And this is the most used schedule type in Revit, and it allows you to list and quantify all element type categories, all element category types. So you will use this to create your tabular views of doors, walls, quantities, areas, rooms, and so on. So basically, like the name suggests, schedule and quantities, it focuses on the quantity of elements. So for example, you want to find out how many doors you have in the building, how many windows you have in the building, how those things. Of course, you can add more parameters, but the focus of this first type of schedule in Revit is on the quantities of elements. And then the second one you find in Revit is what's called graphical column schedule. This type of schedule can graphically show the structural columns in the project and the attributes. So this is mostly used by structural engineers. So it's like them say, it's graphical column schedule. And then the third one you have is what's called material takeoff. Material takeoff is a bit similar to schedule and quantities, but the major difference is that while the schedule and quantities focuses on the quantity of elements, this one tends to focus on the materials. For example, you want to find out how much concrete you need to erect all the 200 mm wall in a building, for example, or 230 mm wall or 150 mm wall, for example. So in this case, even if you're showing other parameters, your focus is more on the quantity of the materials. Or for example, you want to find out the amount of glazing you need for your curtain walls on a building. So the focus there is more on the materials. So this type of schedule can calculate the area or volume of materials across any family category. For example, you might want to know the volume of concrete within the building, like I said. So regardless of whether the concrete is in a wall or a floor, a column, you can configure the schedule to report the total amount of that material in the project. So it's a bit similar to scale and quantities, but the first focus on the quantity of elements, this one focus on the materials. And then the fourth you have is what's called a sheet list. Then the fourth you have is what's called a sheet list. So this schedule allows you to create a list of all the sheets in the project. In addition to the number and name of the sheet, you can include current revision version, date, and revision description. So in a big project, you usually have so many sheets. You can have all these high-rise buildings with as many as 150 sheets on a project. So with the sheet list, you can be able to track their revisions, who is responsible for what sheets, and even their revision number, the dates, revision description, and all those things. So that's basically what a sheet list. This one focuses on just the sheets on a project. And they also have the node block. This type of schedule lists the parameters of generic annotation families that are used in your project. So the focus of this one is more on 2D elements like symbols and icons, and those things are not 3D elements. Revit is a 3D software. Well, despite the fact that it's a 3D software, it allows you to still schedule annotation items like symbols. So that's where node block comes in. So these are different from element tags because the values reported in node block schedule come from annotation families, not the model objects, like I said earlier. So you can also use a node block to list your symbols, things like your center lines, your not arrows. So basically with this, there's nothing you cannot schedule in Revit. What you cannot schedule with the typical scale and quantities of material takeoff, you can use a node block to scale it using the symbols and all that. And then the last one I have is view list. So this schedule generates a list of all the views in the project browser and their properties. So this is a bit similar to sheet list. In Revit, you have what's called the view and have a sheet. So a sheet or a view is basically where you do your design, architects and engineers, that's where they do their designs. And then by the time you want to print, you now reduce it to a scale, maybe scale 1 to 100, scale 1 to 200, and now place on a sheet. So the sheet is where you find a title block and all those other information. So basically you can have multiple views on one sheet, but cannot have the same view in more than one sheet. So those are the kind of things. So this final schedule just focuses on the views this time and not the sheet. So a view list is useful for managing your project because the schedule is bidirectional, which allows you to edit many view properties at the same time. So these are basically the types of schedules you find in Revit, and depending on what you want to itemize or schedule, you choose the type that you want to start with. And then each of the schedule types in Revit gives you the ability to select the related element properties that you can mix and match to track elements within the model. So when you create a new schedule, you must first of all select the category. So basically, Revit have different categories of elements. A wall is a different category from a window in Revit. A window is different from a floor or a roof and other. So when you want to create a schedule in Revit, the first thing you have to decide is what category do you choose? So that category is what determines the parameters that you see subsequently. So once you've chosen the category, depending on the category that you chose, you now start the actual scheduling, which presents you with 6 different tabs depending on the type of schedule that you choose. So which I will explain all this in detail when I move into Revit, but you see different tabs. The first one is fields. This is where you select all the parameters that you want to add to your schedule. The next one is filter. This allows you to filter off elements. For example, I want to generate a schedule showing all the doors on the first floor of a building. I can generate a schedule and filter by floor and filter off all those doors that are not in the first floor, for example. And then you have the sorting and grouping. This is where you decide how you want to arrange, how you want to sort and group together those parameters in your schedule. And then you have the formatting. Formatting is basically where you also decide how the schedule will look. For example, is it going to be aligned to the left or to the right? Do you want to rename some of the headers? Do you want to show the total and all those things? Which I will still look at all this in detail when I move into Revit. And they also have the appearance, which is just basically the graphical appearance of your schedule. What kind of font do you want to use for your text? What kind of line width do you want to use and all those things? So those are basically the major tabs. Then depending on the schedule type as well, if you are creating some special schedule like room schedule, you also see one more tab called embedded schedule. So this allows you to embed a schedule into another schedule. For example, you can create a room schedule and embed a furniture schedule inside it. And that will show you the furniture arrangements room by room across your project. So that's where embedded schedule, but this is only applicable to just very few categories like rooms and spaces and all those things that you can embed geometric elements into. So those are the various tabs you find within a Revit schedule. And then finally, you also have what's called a multi-category schedule. So like I mentioned earlier, before you start doing your schedule, you need to choose a category, which can be door, wall, window, whatever, column, casework. But there are some instances where you want one schedule to account for multiple categories of elements. Let's say, for example, you are procuring different multiple categories of elements from the same manufacturer. Your doors, your windows, your furniture, and your plumbing fittings and all those things coming from the same manufacturer. And you want to create a schedule showing all the elements you are procuring from that same manufacturer. So something like that now, you need to account for multiple categories of elements in the same schedule. That's where multi-category schedule comes in. By the time you want to create a schedule, that's usually the first option you see before you begin to see the other categories. So this type of multi-category schedule allows you to account for multiple categories, but then the parameters that you can add is much more limited because that same parameter needs to be available across all those different categories. For example, every category in Revit has some parameters like keynotes, manufacturer, identity data, and so many of those kind of things. So those are the kind of information that you can add to a multi-category schedule. And then you can even create more parameters to also add to it. But I believe when I start demonstrating, you see some of these things. And then you also have what's called a schedule key, which is basically a special kind of schedule that gives you the ability to populate a list of values before placing any actual objects in your model, as well as manage these values. This is people hardly use this. People that use this are mostly MEP engineers. For example, you want to control one schedule using another schedule. So this is just a special kind of schedule. And it actually takes some advances of Revit to make use of, but it's also one of those kind of schedules you can generate in Revit. And then, like I mentioned earlier, I have embedded schedule. So embedded schedule basically allows you to embed a schedule into another one. For example, you can create a room schedule and you embed furniture, or you embed your doors and windows and whatnot to show how they are distributed across the spaces or rooms in a project. So that's basically what embedded schedule does. So it's only available, that tab only available when you create a room or space schedule, like I mentioned, and the embedded schedule tab allows you to associate another schedule of elements. And then the primary use of the embedded schedule is to create a schedule for spaces and associate elements from MEP-based systems, such as ducts, piping system, electrical system. Well, architects as well can also use it to show their furniture arrangements across their spaces and rooms. And you also have what's called a legend. This is not really a schedule, but there are some times when if you cannot show something properly using a schedule in Revit, you can also use a legend. Legend is more manual, it's much more manual than a schedule. You're basically dragging elements and then you're typing it. But for example, architects, in most of their documentation, they usually show their door legend or their window legend, showing the different types of doors and windows they have. So this kind of presentation that you see here is done using a legend. It looks a bit similar to a schedule, but it's much more manual. A schedule is automatically updated, but for a legend, most of these you have to type it as a text. So if there are some things you want to achieve that are not achievable using a schedule, then a legend becomes an alternative. But for example, we have MEP, M&E engineers. Most times, if you look at the documentation, the first thing you see is a legend showing all the icons, all the symbols, what they represent, all the switches, the sockets, the docks and whatnot. So those kind of things, you can easily do it in Revit using a legend. So, and of course, one last thing about schedules in Revit is the fact that you can reuse them. Once you've created a schedule for one project, you can easily copy it across your projects. What that does is that it will bring in all the properties of that schedule into a new project, but the quantities that you're seeing, it will come from the project, but the properties will come from the wherever you copied it from. So this just allows you to, once you've finalized and you've been able to perfect one schedule in a project, you can easily copy it and replicate. It will just bring in all the settings you've done, because some of those settings can take time to create. So it just serves as a template that you can easily copy and paste in different projects. So at this point, I'll just go into Revit and begin to show some of these things. So I believe you can see my screen. Can you see my screen? Or what
Yes,
can you see
we
on my
can
screen?
see it. The basic sample projects.
Yes.
Okay, okay, fine. Yes, they can see it. Yes, they can see it. So I understand. Okay, so before I go into the actual schedule, I'll just quickly run through the Revit interface, which what you see here, all I'm using is Revit 2023, which is the latest version of Revit that they just released last month or thereabouts. So when you launch Revit, this is what you typically see. In fact, by the time you even before I open this project, this is the first thing you see, which is your home page. So from here, you will see your recent projects and you see your recent families. So when it comes to Revit, there's something called families and something called projects. So a project is comprised of multiple families. For example, all the components you bring into your project, like doors, your windows, all those things are called component families. So they are created outside of the project, and then you bring them into your project. So this is where you see all the recent families that you've worked on. And then this is now where you see your recent projects. And you can open a new project, or you can open an existing project or create a new one. You can open a new family, or you can open an existing family or create a new one. And then if you are connected, if you have the license, this Autodesk Docs basically allows you to collaborate with other people on the project remotely without having to be in the same location. So that's what this Autodesk Docs here is for. So when you now open a project, you now have this very busy looking interface. I'll just summarize this. So basically at the top here, this is what you call your quick access toolbar. This is where you see the tools I use very frequently. You can even add, you can remove. If you click on this drop down here, you can check and uncheck, click on customize, you can customize more things and all that. And then if you want to add a tool to there, you can easily right click on any tool on this, what's called the ribbon, and you can add it to your quick access toolbar. So that's basically the first thing that you find here. And then below it, you now have what's called your ribbon. And the ribbon is broken down into different tabs. So these tabs is it just basically, it's also broken down into what's called panels. And each panel is now a collection of similar tools. So for example, we have the architecture tab, which is where the architects spend most of their time. So under the architecture tab, you have the build panel, the circulation panel, the model panel, room and area panel. So this is just basically, for example, this build panel, this is where you see all the tools you use to design a building. That's why it's called a build panel. So that's basically a tab. They have the architecture tab for architects. You have the structure tab for structural engineers. You also see the panels under it. You have the steel tab for people that are into steel fabrication and all that. And I also have the precast, which is also, most of these three tabs are mostly for structural engineers. And I have the systems tab for M&E engineers. So you can see, please kindly mute your mic. Someone's mic is. So you can see the systems tab, which is for M&E engineers. You can see the panels under the HVAC, fabrication, P&ID, mechanical, plumbing and piping, electrical, and others. So these are for M&E engineers. So you can see that multiple disciplines can work at the same time within Revit. And then you also have the set tab, which is what allows you to bring in different files into Revit. For example, you can bring in a structural model into an architectural model. You can bring in an AutoCAD file in 2D and use it to create a 3D model. You can bring in so many kind of things, like even PDF, images, and whatnot. That's basically the inside tab. And they have the annotate tab. So after you've created a 3D model, this tab is where you now begin to detail your model. You can add things like dimensions, texts, detail lines, regions, components, and whatnot. So basically to make your work look very detailed, this is where you do most of the annotations from. And then even things like tags, you want to call out properties of elements in Revit, is from this annotate tab. And I have the analyze tab. Analyze tab is used mostly by engineers. On the right side is more of structural, and on the left side is more of electrical. So you can carry out so many types of analysis from here. You can see structural analysis, structural analytical models, spaces and zones for mechanical engineers. So all the analysis you can do, there are so many analysis you can do in Revit. You can see this robot structural analysis. This integrates with another software called robots for structural engineers. So all the analysis are done from this analyze tab. And then you have the masking and site tab, which is mostly used for early stages of a design. So for architects, most times, if you're working on a complex project, they have to first of all create the mass of the building, and then they also model the sites. That's why it's called the master and site. So all those early stage designs is carried out from this tab. Someone's mic is on. I don't know the person is. Please kindly mute your mic. I don't know who is the coordinator of this kind. Just mute everybody. So you also have the Collaborate tab, which is one of the most important tabs in Revit. From this tab, you can have multiple people working on the same Revit model at the same time. So basically, it's the way it works is you break down the model into what's called work sets, and each person can now focus on different work sets. With that, they can synchronize to what's called a central file. So basically, with that, if more than one person can be working on the same Revit file, and that's one of the beauty of Revit, which makes it one of the most popular tools in the industry. Even remotely, earlier I showed you the Autodesk Docs, which allows people to even collaborate remotely. You can have an architectural team in Nigeria, a structural engineering team in UK, the M&E team in US, and all of them, they are working on the same model at the same time. So all those things is what you can do from the Collaborate tab. And then the View tab is basically where you organize your views, create your view templates, filter stuffs, and all that. So from here, you can see that you can create your plan views, your elevation, your sections, your 3D views, and whatnot. So all those things, this is basically where you create the views in Revit. And then the Manage tab is basically where you basically manage the project. This is mostly settings. For example, you want to set your object styles, your materials, and all that. So this is just more of settings that controls the way the project behaves. That's basically what you find out the Manage tab. And then all these other ones here, depending on the plugins you install. For example, I've installed some plugins, they might add new tabs. If you install a fresh version of Revit, you might not see some of these ones here. So you can see this RFA to format, which is because I have formats installed on my system. You can see the Revit DB link, which is database and all that. So the more add-ins you install on your system, it might even add more. So you find all those ones under this add-ins tab. And you also have the quantification, which is also useful for quantity surveyors, but you need to install the plugin as well. So this kind of extends what you're able to do. You can see the area book extension, building book extension, room book extension, and all that. And they also have the interoperability tools, which is mostly tailored towards converting your BIM model to COBie standard for other BIM stuff and interoperability. So these are some of the tabs you see. And finally, you also have the modify tab, which is basically as you're working in Revit, if you click on anything, you can modify it. As you click on it, it will even add more properties depending on what you selected. So that's basically where you do the modifications. So you can see that most of the work you do in Revit is you're going to be interacting heavily with the ribbon. And then beneath the ribbon, you now have other things. For example, on the left side here, you can see what's called the properties browser or the properties palette. There are three things here. The first one is what you call the type selector. If I click on this wall, I can change the type of the wall. For example, you can see that this wall type is currently CL_W1. I can easily switch this to timber cladded wall now. So that's the same way you can swap any type of element in Revit. So you can see that this is now a different wall type. The same thing I can do for doors and windows. So this is called the type selector. You can easily swap from one type to another, which is also one of the interesting things about Revit. It allows you to easily swap between elements. And then under the type selector, you now find what's called the properties browser. So this properties browser is broken down into two parts. You have what you call the instance properties, meaning that whatever property you are changing from it, because as a quantity surveyor, the more you get used to Revit, you might be the one changing the properties of elements. For example, you want to change the manufacturer, you want to change the keynote of an element, and all those things. So whatever you are changing from this place is called instance property, meaning that it affects only this particular instance. So this wall you see here now is CLW1 wall. That's the wall type, right? So if I click on this one and I say select all the instances in the entire project, you notice that I have, if you check the count of this, you see that I have 6 of it in this project. If you check filter, which if I find from here now, you see that I have 6 of this. So now if I click on this one now and I change anything from here, this will affect only this particular instance of this wall. And that's why it's called instance property. But by the time I click on edit type, which you see beside this, you click edit type, whatever you're not changing from here now is now called type properties. So because I have 6 instances of this wall in the project, anything I change here will affect the 6 of them. In fact, if I add more later, it will automatically affect it as long as you can see the type CLW1. Unless I can even switch to a different type from here, but whatever type that you see here, CLW1, whatever I'm changing here affects the entire type. So if you have 100 instances of the elements in your project, it will affect all of them. So those 3 things are what make up this your property browser. You have the type selector, you have the instance properties, and you have the type properties. And then another important panel you see is your project browser. Just see this as in your windows, just like your file explorer. This is basically where you find all the view types in Revit. So depending on how it's arranged, you can see under here, you see that the view type is views in bracket all. So if I click on browser organization, which is kind of advanced, you see that you can switch, you can even arrange by discipline, you can arrange by phase, you can arrange by type, and then by discipline. But this default one is usually okay. So from here now, you can see that I have floor plans. You can see all the floor plan views I have. I have 3D views. And then recently in Revit, these ones in blue, it just indicates this, they just added this feature in 2023. These ones in blue tells you that they're already placed on the sheet. So the ones that you see that are not highlighted in blue means that they're not placed on a sheet yet. So basically, these are all the 3D views I have. These are all the elevation views I have. These are all the section views. You can see that even the section have different types of section, building section, wall section, and all that. Which, if you go back to your view type, you want to create a section, you can choose the type of section you want to create, but that's a bit kind of advanced. So, but basically, you can see all the section types you have. You can see your detailed views, even your rendered views. If I click on this now, you can see renderings have been done on this. So all those view types, this is basically arranged under the project browser. And then you can see the legends, the schedules, the sheets. So for example, now, if I click on these plans, you see that these are multiple views. This is your ground floor and the first floor plan. These are two views that have been placed on a sheet, which is why I was differentiating at that time. So if you are creating a sheet list now, it will be listing all the sheets you have on the project. But if you are creating a view list, it will be listing out all the views you have on your project. So these views that are in blue are the ones that have been placed on a sheet. So these are, if you want to print this out now for a project site or something, I'll be printing out the sheets and not the views, because these have been scaled down. If I click on this view now, you see that the scale is 1 to 100. I can change the scale from here to something else. If I put it to scale 1 to 200 now, you see that it automatically resizes on the sheet, right? So that's basically how the sheets and the view works in Revit. So basically all those things are arranged under the project browser. You can see all the sheets and the families. Earlier I mentioned that a project is comprised of multiple families. So under this family, by the time you expand the families, you begin to see all the kind of families, the categories, which is very important. By the time you want to create a schedule, you need to choose what type of category you want to start with. So for example, you can see doors. If I expand these doors, you see all the door categories, all the door types that I have in this project. So this is a category called door. Under the door, you have types, which is now all this. So all these things are arranged under your project browser, under the family tree. So this is the family tree. If you are familiar with Navisworks, you also know that Navisworks also have similar thing called family tree. So this is where all those categories you see in Navisworks, they are able to belong to the right category because under Revit has already placed them under the right category. And that's the beauty of BIM software. All these categories, every BIM software deals with categories. Every model objects belong to a category. You can't just model something that looks like a door, but in reality, it actually belongs to a window category. Revit will not see it as a door. It will not even behave as a door in Revit because in reality, it doesn't belong to that category. So depending on the category you choose, that's why it's important when you are creating a schedule, you need to ensure that you are choosing the right category, which we'll soon get to in a bit. So that's families, and you also have what's called groups, and then you also have Revit links, which I mentioned earlier. From your insert tab, you can insert a Revit file into another Revit file. For example, an architect might want to bring in a structural engineer's model into his project to coordinate with the structural engineer in real time. So if I've linked any Revit file here now, all of them will be shown under these Revit links. So those are some important elements on the Revit interface. Under here as well, you find some other tools. For example, if I go to a floor plan now, you notice that some things will become active here. From here, I can change the scale and some other, these are called visual display elements, which kind of controls how the elements will display graphically. So most times these are mostly used by architects to coordinate. And then under here as well, you see if you have collaboration enabled, because it's not enabled yet, it's asking me to enable collaboration, which I don't want to do now. But from here, you can see this is called the worksets toolbar, where you see all the worksets that have been created and some other things that you find as well. Then this one final thing that you see here is what's called it controls what you're able to select. the selection filter, which is also, if you also find it in your modify, I think it's always there, depending on, irrespective of the tab you select, it's always there beside it. So if you click on this drop down, this is what determines what you're able to select. So for the fact that I've checked this select link, if I link any file here, I can be able to select it. If I have an underlay, for example, I can have a ground floor as an underlay to my first floor. Because it's not checked here, I cannot select it. So what are some things that have to do using Revit? And they also have this final element that looks like a funnel. So when you select multiple things, it will tell you the amount of things I've selected. So you see that just by highlighting over my screen now, I've selected 307 elements. So this funnel just gives you the number. But if you now want to find out the breakdown, you also see another funnel that is up here. If you now click on this one, which is the filter, it will not break it down what you selected. So just by scrolling over my screen now, I've selected room separation line, 4 of them, 2 casework, color fill agent, and all. You can see the way is all broken down. And all this is, by the time you add it up, it gives you 307 elements. So those are just the basic summary of the Revit interface. One last thing here, up here too, is where you manage your license and all that. So for example, because I didn't connect to internet before I opened my Revit, I've not opened my Revit for the past 5 days. So it's already counting down. Because I'm using a genuine license actually, if you don't connect to internet, automatically it will place you in 30 days trial. So once I connect to internet before opening Revit now, this countdown will disappear. But this is basically where you can change your account. If I go to here, you can see my account details and I can change my license and all that. And they also have the App Store where you can download some plugins and whatnot. So that's basically the summary of the Revit interface. So at this point now, I'll now go into the Revit schedule proper. So for you to create schedules in Revit, from the interface, which is the ribbon, you go to the View tab. So the View tab, this is where you create different types of views. And interestingly, a schedule is just another view type in Revit. The same way you look at your project through a floor plan, which is graphical or an elevation or 3D, a schedule is just another way to look at it. This time around, you're looking at it in a tabular view, which is basically, so the same things you're seeing here is the same thing you have on your schedule. And which is why I mentioned earlier that Revit is bidirectional. Anything you change on the floor plan will also change on the schedule. Anything you change on the schedule will update on the floor plan. So to Revit, it's just another view type. So which is why if you go to the View tab under the Create panel, you see it beside all these plans. Hello, can you hear me? Okay, apologies, there was a slight network issue. So what was the last thing you guys said? No, what was the last thing you heard before I disconnected? Okay.
Yes,
Yeah, so I was saying that schedules are basically.
You were talking about the different views about schedules and schedule being a view also in Revit.
But the screen is not showing.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay. Apologies again. The internet is fluctuating a bit. So Revit schedules in Revit is under the View tab. Once you go to the View tab, go to the Create panel, you see schedules drop down here. So when I was doing introduction, I explained what these 6 schedule types are used for. The first one is for quantities. This one is for graphical column schedule used by structural engineers. This one is for material takeoff. This one is for listing all the sheets you have. This one is for node blocks, which are mostly for 2D elements, symbols, and all that. While this one is for listing out your views. So once you understand how this first one works, you can pretty much do the rest, because this one is actually the most extensive of all of them. So I'll use it as an example. I will demonstrate different types of schedule. Maybe I'll start with the work schedule, for example. So for me to create the work schedule, once I choose, because I want to focus on the quantity of the walls, not the materials, I will choose schedule and quantities. Once you click on that, you now see this new schedule dialog on the screen. So this is basically where you choose the category. So this category now, depending on the discipline, you can even choose, can filter by discipline. Since the wall is an architectural element, or maybe I'm not interested in M&E elements for now, I can just filter off this. I can uncheck these ones to reduce the categories so that I don't have to scroll too much. For example, I can uncheck, as I'm unchecking, you see that it's reducing. So for example, I can reduce it to just architecture. I don't have infrastructure here. So this is now just architectural categories. These are the various, you can see that only architecture alone has so many categories. Now, what I want to create is a wall schedule. So I have to look for wall. So I also need to be careful, because if you click on this plus sign, you have wall sweep under it. So if you go and click wall sweep, that means you're just calculating the sweeps that you have on your wall and not the actual wall. So make sure that you click on walls. So if I click on this now, so you can see that also I mentioned about multi-category schedule, which is the first one here. So I'll show that if time permits later. So once you've chosen the category, you also need to look at these things here. You have the name automatically, since there's no wall schedule yet in this project, the name will automatically, to use the category and add schedule after it. If you have one existing before, it might become wall schedule 2. But if you want to rename it, you can rename it from here. And then you also have these 2 options, schedule building components or schedule keys. Initially, when I was doing introduction, I also mentioned about schedule keys. So most times people that use this are electrical engineers. It allows you to control a different schedule using the properties from this schedule. So it's kind of advanced. So make sure that you choose schedule building components. And then phase. Revit also has what's called phases in Revit. If you create a new project, you see new construction, existing phase. So most of the time, you don't want to tamper with this phase unless you really understand how phasing works in Revit. Once you've chosen all these things, you now click OK. You can even search for your categories here too, if this thing is too long and all that. So once you've chosen this now, you click OK. This is now when Revit will bring up these tabs. So depending on the category you choose, as when I choose a room schedule now or area schedule, I will see one more tab here called embedded schedule. Maybe I'll also demonstrate that later. But now these are the 5 tabs that you see, and I'll explain how all these tabs work in a bit. So basically, depending on the category you choose, these are the properties or parameters, more or less. That's what it's called in Revit. These are the existing parameters that are already in the project for that particular category. If I choose a window now, the properties I will see here will be properties of the windows in a project. If I choose a door, the properties I will see here is the properties of a door and all that. So because I've chosen a wall, these are the properties of a wall in Revit, and these are the ones that come with Revit natively. I will show you how to add more to this if what you want to add to your schedule is not here already. So basically, this first tab here, which is called fields, this is where you choose the various parameters you want to add. So let's say, for example, let me reference one that I already did, the one you sent to me. Okay. So let's say, for example, the fields I want to add to this, the first one I have is what's called family and types, which basically tells you the the family and the type of the wall. So the other time we're talking about CLW1, or you might have 150 mm wall, 230 mm wall around it. So this is what shows you the family and type. For you to add a parameter, you can either double click on it, or you click and you click. It's connected now. Yeah, so depending on the for you to add a parameter to your schedule, you just click on a parameter you want to add, and you click on this green arrow here, or you just double click on it. Once you double click on it, it will move to this side. So you can see the scheduled fields. These are the things that will be added to your schedule. The ones you have here are all the parameters for that particular category. So in this case, I can add family and type, and then I add area, and then I can add costs because I want to include the cost for the walls, and then also be able to calculate the total cost in a bit, which is not natively in Revit. So I'll show you how to add that. And then you can even add volume of the walls if you want. You can also add comments, for example. So this basically what you see here is what will represent the columns on your spreadsheets, right? It's just like in Excel. This will be a column, this will be a column, this will be a column. As many columns as you want to have on your schedule, you can either choose them from here, or you can add them if they are not yet in Revit. So for you to add, for example, in this schedule, what I want to do is I want to be able to calculate the total cost of the walls, right? And then for us to now do that, the formula stuff that we did now. Okay, so basically what I want to be able to do on this Revit is the cost in Revit. You already have a parameter for costing in Revit, but this costing doesn't work with the area of the wall, right? So it's fixed. If you click on any wall in Revit, whether that wall, the height of the wall it spans 3 floors, or it's just 500 mm, 500 meters, 500 mm height, or whatever, that cost is fixed. It's just a parameter. So that's basically like a unit cost. So for you to now derive a cost that varies with the area of that wall, you might need to create a new parameter for it. So for us to do that now, if I now go to this new parameter, what I will now do is that you can see this is where you can create a new project parameter. So this is very important that you understand how this actually works. So for example, what I want to now be able to calculate here is the total cost that works with the area of the wall, right? So now this is the name I can give it. I can call it total cost. Now, if you choose here, you can see that by the side of it, you have 2 options. This can be type, or this can be instance. So if you remember when I was talking about the properties palette or properties browser, I mentioned that there are 2 types of parameters in Revit. You have what is called the instance parameters, and have what is called the type parameter. So how do you want this parameter to behave? Do you want it to change on a wall-to-wall basis, instance by instance basis, or do you want it to change on a type by type basis? So this total cost now, because you want it to be reflective of an individual wall, even if you have a 230 mm wall on your project, you can have one that the height is 1.5 meters, you can have another one that the height is 6 meters. So you want to be able to create a parameter that changes dependent on the height or the area of that wall. So in this case, I can make it a type parameter. I can make it an instance parameter rather, meaning that I'll be able to manipulate this parameter on an element by element basis. And now, what is the discipline of this? Is it something that has to do with electrical, energy, HVAC, infrastructure piping? It doesn't have anything to do with any of this. So you can just leave it as common. And now, what type of parameter is this? This has to do with cost, right? So I can put this as currency. Okay. Okay, what I'm actually demonstrating is how to create a new parameter, not a calculated parameter. So this is just basically you creating a new parameter, right? So once I do this total cost and all that, or I can call it total cost. Then you also have these values aligned by group. By the time you start grouping elements together, do you want the value to be fixed on the group by group basis, or you want it to still be able to change and all that? So basically, once you finish doing this, when you click this now, you notice that this is now a new parameter. But what we've actually done now is just adding a new parameter. What I actually want to show is how to derive a calculated parameter. In this new Revit, they also have allowed you to bring in parameters. Maybe you can have a parameter file somewhere on the cloud and can bring it to your project. So this one will begin to connect to the internet switch. This is just a new feature they added. But the next one I have there is what's called calculated parameter, which is the one I actually need for this. So I'll just delete this other one that I did before. So I can, if you want to delete, you can see this delete, but you can only delete the one that you added by yourself. You can see that these ones, because they are natively in Revit, you cannot delete it. What you can only do is to remove it. So if I want to remove this area, I simply click on this red button here and it will be removed from my schedule. It will go back into the project. And you can also rearrange. If I want the area to come before the family and type, for example, I can move it up and all that. So that's basically what this does. So what I also want to demonstrate is the calculated parameter. So the way this calculated parameter works is that you have an existing parameter, you want to use it to derive a new one. For example, we already have a parameter in Revit called cost, but that cost doesn't work with the area of the walls. We want to create a parameter that adjusts based on the area of the wall. So that's one I was actually supposed to demonstrate, which is I can call it total cost. And then now is a formula. You also need to be sure that the discipline is correct and the type is correct. So the type here is also currency, right? So what's now the formula? The formula now is that I want to multiply the unit cost for your wall now times the area. So for example, let's say your unit cost for a wall is let's say it's 500 naira per meter square. That's the unit cost for your wall. So that unit cost is what I will now multiply by area to derive the total cost of the wall. So that one that you have in Revit is the unit cost. So I'll add it and then I'll multiply it by area. For me to do that, I'll add times and I'll add area. Now, this is the tricky part with this, because this, I've told Revit that these units, the type is currency, or this parameter, the type of the parameter is currency. Now, if I type cost times area, Revit will be confused because this is it's not a currency. By the time you multiply a cost by area, it's no more a currency. So now what will happen now if I click OK now, Revit will give you an error. It will be telling me that it has inconsistent units. So a way to trick Revit to do this is, depending on what you're doing, if you are multiplying, like this one now, doing cost times area, that means I need to put this guy in brackets and divide it by 1. I'll just do over 1, for example, and then I click OK. But if you are dividing, then you have to multiply this guy in bracket by 1. So basically, this is just a way to neutralize it to Revit and make it feel like this is actually correct. And once you click this, and I see that it doesn't give me that error again. If I click on edit now, go back there, and I see that what Revit has done is that it divided this guy by 1 meter square before I multiplied it by area. So that's way it kind of neutralizes this. This is very important whenever you are creating calculated parameters in Revit. So now what happens is that we now have a new parameter called total cost. And this is actually derived from from 2 existing parameters, which are area and cost, right? So these are a new column. You can even have one last one called combined parameters. This one is similar to formula, but to calculated, but it doesn't calculate. What it does is that it just lists out. For example, if I want to call out the area and the cost of a wall, for example, this is just a demonstration. If I do this now, what will happen is that Revit will just tell me the cost of this wall is this, and whatever, if I add a separator, it will just write it out. It's not calculating anything. It's just a text that is written out. So it's just combining the 2 parameters, it's not calculating it. So that's one last thing that you find here. So you see that there are lots going on these fields, because this is basically what determines what will show up in your schedule. And then you can even select fields from the project information. For example, in your schedule, you want to show the client's name or the project number and all those kind of things. If you click on this select available field from, you can choose information from the project information. The initial one was coming from the category that you choose, which is walls, right? You can add other things like project information and all those things to your schedule as well. And then if you have links in your project, you can even include elements from links. So what this does now is that if I have, let's say this is an architectural model, and I have multiple buildings on the same project, and I want to count all the walls in all those buildings, if I include elements in links, Revit will go and count So let's say you're working on an estate project and you have different building typologies, and all those things are linked into the site model. And now you want to create a wall schedule that shows all the walls in the estate. Then I can include elements in links and Revit to count all the walls across all the linked files. So that's basically, well, in this case, we don't have that, so I don't need to check this. So I think I've explained everything on. So you see that this field is very important. This is where you choose your parameters, the columns that shows up on your schedule. And this is where you can either add new parameters, you can add from the cloud, you can calculate using existing parameters, you can combine existing parameters and whatnot. So that's basically at the end of the day, these ones that you have here as scheduled fields is what will show up in your schedule eventually. That's the first tab. And the second one I have here is filter. So this basically is where you filter off things. So let's say, for example, you want to show only cutting walls, or you want to show things that are not, you want to show all the walls that are not cutting walls. Let's say on your cutting wall, you already have something called comments that you used to identify that these are cutting walls. I can easily come here and say filter by comments. Then I say does not contain, for example, cutting wall or something like that. So what this entails is that for every wall in your project that is cutting wall, you have added this as a comment showing that this is a cutting wall. Now, when you come to your schedule and you say comment does not contain cutting wall, Revit will just filter off all the walls that actually contain this. So this is just a way to filter. Another way you can do is I can add a floor or something showing the floor that the element belongs to, and I can filter by floor. So for example, I can show all the walls on the ground floor, all the walls on the first floor and whatnot. Or level. So something like that basically allows you to filter off things. But in this case, I'll just clear the filter because I want to show all the walls. So I can just send it back to none. So you can see that you can keep filtering down. You can filter all the way to, I think, 8 levels deep. And then the next tab you have is the sorting and grouping tab. So this basically determines how you sort and group your elements. So sometimes you can even sort things. You can add a parameter to your schedule just because you want to use it to sort, but there's a way you can make it not to show in your schedule eventually, which I'll also explain in a bit. So in this case, now let's say we want to sort this wall. We want to arrange them, first of all, by their family and type. And then, so once you click on this now, you can see that you can either choose to add a header for each group and also add a footer to it. So let's say I add a header here now, and then I had a footer as well, showing us the count and totals, for example. You can even add blank line in between different groups. So you see that there are two things going on here, is the grouping and the sorting, the way they are grouped together and the way they are also arranged within the groups. That's basically what happens here. So I can choose to add blank line and whatnot. So after sorting by family and type, how else do I want to sort this? So you can even, so I can choose, for example, let's say I add one more parameter from it. It's connected. Okay. So I just wanted to demonstrate how you can add, I think I didn't add counts before. Just add counts. Yes. For example, let's say I want to add this function just because I want to use it to sort. So if I come to my sorting and grouping now, I can say after the family and type. So by function, basically what that tells Revit is in Revit, a wall can be serving as an interior wall, internal wall, external wall, or foundation wall, and all those things. Well, of course, you must have added that as a parameter to your walls. If you have not added it, it will not reflect. So let's say I want to, after family and type, I can say I want to also sort them by their function, for example, and stuff like that. So you see that you can keep going down and down and down. You can even sort by manufacturer and or however you want to arrange those elements. So this is basically how your schedule is arranged. And then here you also have what's called grand totals. So this grand total is very important because to take the total quantity at the end of the column. So when you go scroll to your a particular column, for each parameter, it will be seeing the grand totals. And then this itemizes every instance. It allows you to show every single element on your project. Sometimes this can make your schedule look very long. So if you don't want that, for example, you just want to create a schedule, just summarizing, let's say you have 3 types of doors in your project. You can create a schedule showing that this particular door type, you have 50 of it. this particular dot type, you have 100 of it. This particular dot type, you have 200. You can choose to not itemize every instance so that it will not. So in that case, that's where this count becomes important. But in this case, since you're itemizing every instance, you might just remove this count. There's no need for it since you're already itemizing that, because the count will just be 1 for all of them, which doesn't make any sense, right? So that's basically sorting and grouping. And then the formatting is now where you set up some other things. For example, the heading. This family and type now, let's say it's too long on my schedule as a column, and I want it to be shorter, or for some reason I don't want to show as family and type. I can even change the heading name from here. I can call it something like what type, for example, which is shorter, something like that. You can rename it. So Revit knows that this is referring to this parameter called family and type, but on your schedule, it shows differently, whatever you've named it. And then you also have this heading orientation. So this heading orientation, it becomes visible when you place the schedule on a sheet. So you can make the header to be vertical, the heading of that particular column to be vertical or horizontal. So most times when you finish doing your schedule, it will not notice, you not notice it until you place on a sheet. It's now become visible. And then this is now has to do with alignment. So most time on your typical Excel, you notice that the first column is always aligned to the left and the rest are aligned to the right. So I can select all these columns now and tell Revit to align them to right. Right. So that's some of the things you do under. Okay, yes, exactly. So this cost, for example, instead of showing as costs now, it can come to your schedule and change it to rates so that you know that this is basically what you use to determine the rates. So basically, you're now multiplying the rates by the area to derive your total cost, right? So another good example. So it changes cost to rates and all that. And then, so we've talked about the heading orientation, the alignment, and then you now have hidden field. So I just added this function because even though it might not necessarily reflect anything in the end, but let's say in my project, I've identified the function of all the walls. These walls are internal walls, these walls are external walls, these are foundation walls, these are retaining walls and all that. So I just added it here because I want to use it to filter, but I don't want it to out internal walls 500 times, external walls 200 times, things. It doesn't help anyone. So after I use it to sort and filter, I can just make it a hidden field. So it will not show as a column on my schedule, but inside my schedule, I'm using it to sort and filter. Most times when you do something like that, you might just add a header to it so that someone will still understand what happens. But you might choose not to add footer to it. So those are some of the things you see under this. So I just chose this function and I made it a hidden field. And then you also have what's called conditional formats. I think if I demonstrate a room schedule, I'll show what this means. So this is basically telling Revit to format a particular cell based on a condition. For example, if I'm doing a room schedule, I can tell Revit that, okay, you know what? Or I can even do something like, I can tell Revit, for example, that any wall that the area is more than, that's greater than 50 square meter, for example, that it should highlight it in red. That's basically the way conditional formatting works in Revit. So you're just setting a condition and you're telling Revit that whatever satisfies this condition, format it this way for me. That is what conditional formatting does for you. So you see that is conditional formatting. So if we create this schedule now, if we see any cell that is red, that means that wall is more than 50 meters square. And then also you have based on the totals. So this total is also important to mention that, for example, I want to be able to calculate the total wall area for that column. So this one now has to do with that particular column, not the entire schedule. So this area now, I can tell Revit to calculate the total area for my walls. The same thing with the cost. I want to know the total cost. I want to know the total volume. So this only applies to things that are either area or length and all that. If I click on comments now, you see that it's grayed out because you can't calculate total comments. And cost too, I want to know the total cost. These rates, I don't think you need to calculate totals. No calculation, yeah. So what I want to mention here is that if I come to this area and I tell you to calculate totals, but then under sorting and grouping, you didn't check these grand totals, Revit will not calculate anything because This is what affects the entire schedule. This sorting and grouping affects the entire schedule, but this formatting affects just a column. So if you've already unchecked this one that affects the entire schedule, I now come and tell Revit to this one here, grand totals overrides this one calculating here. So it's important to mention that sometimes people will come here to say calculate totals, and then they will forget to check these grand totals, and they don't say any totals. They now be confused. So why is it not showing any total? That's because this actually controls this. It overrides it. And then of course you have the final one, which is appearance. This appearance now is where you now begin to decide what type of text you want to use for your title, for your header, for your border. Do you want to have an outline around your schedule? Do you want to stripe the rows? This allows you to choose different colors intermittently. So you can also, this is just basically graphics. Then show stripe rows on sheets and whatnot, grid on your headers and footers. Just graphics. So you see that once you understand how these 5 tabs work, we talked about the fields, which is where you choose all your parameters, calculate, and all those things. Talked about the filter, which is where you filter off what you don't want. Talked about sorting and grouping, which is how you arrange and sort your parameters. Formatting, where you do some other formatting of the individual columns. And then appearance, which is the formatting, the graphical appearance of the entire schedule. Once you've done all that, you click OK. And so you see everything I've been setting so far. This is the way it now appears. So you can see now what we have here is that we have basic wall. So the reason I'm seeing this header here is because if I go back to my sorting and grouping, so you can see all those tabs here too as well from your properties palette. So the reason is because under this sort by family and type, I have this header. So that's why it's calling out this header. So now it's telling me that this is actually wall cavity. And now the reason you are seeing interior under it is because I told you that after arranging by the family and type, you should arrange by the function. So now you have this CLW1 and they are all external walls. So the reason why I see exterior, interior, and all that is because you can see interior, exterior, foundation. You have retaining walls. You can see retaining walls here and all that. The reason you are seeing that now, let me even go back to the floor plan, is because, okay, this is a sheet. The reason you are seeing those things is because if you click on this one now, if you go to the function is a type property, you see that the function is external, exterior. If I change this now to interior now, for example, which is not true, but you can see that this is CLW1, and I change this to interior, for example. If you go back to your work schedule, you notice that CLW1, they are now all interior. So you see that this is bidirectional. So once you change anything on your floor plan, it updates automatically. So imagine working AutoCAD and I wanted to update all this now. I have to manually inputting all those things and all that. So the Revit is very intelligent, it's bidirectional. So I will just undo. If I click Ctrl Z now, if I go back here and undo what I did now, and I come back to my schedule, you notice that I change back to exterior. So now, if you look at the way the schedule is arranged, I have header for the first arrangement, which is family and type. I have header for the second one, which is function. If I go back to this sorting and grouping now, and I uncheck this header, for example, and I click OK, you notice that it doesn't show all those interior, exterior, blah, blah, blah. You are the one that you are creating the schedule. You are the one that wants to, you want to determine how you want it. Now, the interesting part here now is that we've not set the rates. Because we've not set the rates for this, there's no total cost. And now I also want this to be side by side so that it's a bit clear. So what I can do now, if I go back to my fields, I can move this total cost to come after the cost, which is actually the rates, right? Now, the two fields are blank, right? They are blank. And now if you also look at these comments, because I've used it to filter, there's no comment yet, so I don't even need it to show. I can go back to my field, to my formatting. To my formatting now, this comments, I can make it a hidden field because it's just a blank column. It's not doing anything, just occupying space. Right. So now the one I want to show is the rate and the total cost, which I believe is most important to quantity surveyors. Now, let's say the rate for this word type, this CLW1, which is, let me just show the function again. the header. So let's say this is an exterior one. Now let's say the rate now. I don't know the rates. I'm not a quantity surveyor anyway more. So let's say this is 3,000 per meter square. That's the rate. Now, once I do this, Revit will give me a warning because this is actually affecting multiple, it's affecting the entire type, right? So once I click OK now, so you see what has happened. Now it's not calculating this total cost you're seeing here now is based on the area of this wall. The area of this wall is 25 meters square. And also just to, I think I skipped one last thing. When I was talking about formatting, I skipped one, which is the field format. And that's because it was greater. If I go back to this total cost for, or the area, for example, you have this field format. This field format is what it uses the what's called the project setting. So depending on the units you set on your projects, that's what determines where to show. So for this area, for example, I want it to be showing me 2 decimal places so that I know the exact, I want it to be more precise. So if I go to the rounding now, I'll click on 2 decimal places. I can even choose to show the unit symbol if I want another, and then I click OK. Now, what happens now if I come here now, I can see the precise area of this. So instead of 25, which was in 0 decimal place at that time, it's now 2 decimal place. So I can see if you multiply this 24.78 by 3,000, which is the rate, it will give you total cost of this particular wall. So this is now dependent on the area of the wall, right? So this 74.58 times 3,000. So this is for this particular wall. So let's say the rate of this one is 3,000, and it is interior wall, which is the wall cavity and all that. If I set the rate for this now, let's say this one is 2.5 or whatever. Of course, the quantity surveyor, this is now where you get the market rates. So when I get the market rates, you just take a Revit model and you begin to fill in all these values, and you see your schedule begin to come out. So this is a foundation wall. Let's say it's more expensive. Let's say it's 3.5 for example. You want to put it as many walls as you have on that project that is of this type, it should be updating, because this rate is actually a type parameter for you. If you don't want to do it from schedule, if you go to a floor plan or a view, if I click on this wall now and I go to edit type, you see cost. So this cost is kind of synonymous to, you can see that 3,000 at types is already here. I did from schedule, now it's showing on a floor plan. So that's the Revit for you. This is just a different view. You're not working outside of the 3D model. You're just working on the same information. You're just extracting that information and reducing it to a spreadsheet. That's the way Revit works. It's not like AutoCAD where you're drawing lines and typing text and all that. It's actually extracting the information you have in your 3D model. And that's basically what information is all about when it comes to BIM. You're extracting information from the 3D model and reduce it to the spreadsheets. And you now decide how you want to show it, the formatting and the sorting and grouping and all that. So that's just how you put all this. Let's say this interior is the same rate to the other one, which is 2.5. I just type 2.5 here, and then I click OK, and then this is interior as well. So is it work? Yeah, it's connected. Yeah. Right. Well, I'm still in the meeting now. Oh, okay. So nobody can hear what I'm saying. Oh, okay. Okay. Well, normally, if the host leaves, it will automatically assign someone else to the host.
Me, I'm still hearing you.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see your screen.
Yes, they can see me. Yes. Oh, okay. Okay, yeah, so you guys can hear me. So I was basically trying to populate all the rates and the total cost. So this is now where experience comes in. It's not everything that software will do for you. Software is just a tool that aids your work. So you are the quantity surveyor, you get the up-to-date market rates and you fill up all these So let's say this is 25, like I did the other time. And then they will ask you, if as you fill it up, because it's a type property, to affect all the types of that particular wall, all the instances of that particular wall type. So this one is the retaining wall. Let's say it's also the same rate to the foundation wall or whatever, or it's even more expensive. Let's say it's 4,000 because it's usually thicker than normal wall. So let's say you can see as you fill that up, it's coming. Let's say this is 3,000. And then exterior 3,000. So these are all wall types, right? As you fill them up, and you can see that total cost is updating automatically. Everything is updating. Exterior, let's just say this a bit slightly different. Now this one is 3.2 or whatever. So once you do this now, you see that you have created a schedule. So from here now, what you are seeing is you have one interior wall, you have those two tabs, and then into the total area of all the walls in this project, which is, so imagine if you have to calculate all these figures manually. Imagine how I'm sure that it will not even be as accurate as this, because this automatically updates. If I delete a wall now, all these numbers will reflect it. And then because this is just the rate, I don't want to calculate total rates. That's why I did not, by the time I was doing formatting, I did not add calculate totals under this. That's why that particular column does not show. Sorry, 1 minute. So because I did not add this calculate totals to this rate, which is the cost, that's why for this column, nothing is showing here, and that's intentional. And then so you can see now the total cost using this ambiguous rate that I just put here. This is total cost, which is, I believe, as a quantity surveyor to derive this figure. I'm sure that will not be so easy if you don't have all these things. And then this one here is the volume. For some reason, there's no volume for this curtain wall. Okay, this is actually a curtain wall. Okay. So now there are also some interesting things. Now I want to trace this wall. I want to find out where this particular wall is on my project. By the time you click any element on your schedule, there's something called highlight element in model. So if I want to trace this wall now, I can say highlight element in model, and then it will take me straight to where that element is. So you can see this is the curtain wall that is showing on my schedule. Now, if I check the comments, now let's say I select what I wanted to filter at that time. Let's say I don't want to include curtain walls in my schedule, for example, because you can see that they don't even have volume. It's not like a normal wall type, it's more like a glazing on a window. So I don't want to add it to my project. What I can do now is if I select all these curtain wall now, the entire project, you can see that there are 9 of them. I can go to comments, which is what I was showing the other time, and I say curtain wall. This is not the only way to do it. You can also filter it using the type of the wall, but this is a safer way to do it. So now all the curtain walls on this project have these comments, curtain wall. And I don't want them to show on my schedule. So what I'll do now, if I go to my wall schedule now, I go back to filter, which is this, and then I add a filter saying that the comments does not contain curtain wall, for example, and then I click OK. I think it's the other way around. It actually did the opposite of what I want. See, as I'm supposed to click does not contain, I'm mistakenly click contain. So does not contain. So you need to be careful of exactly what I'm doing. So now you see that it's the other way around. So it has filtered off the curtain walls on my project. So these are now actual walls, because that is more like a glaze. So these are, you can see now that we've applied filter. And now, because that comment, I don't want it to, okay, let's even go back. If I go back to my formatting, and I click on comments now, and I unhide it. It was hidden, it was a hidden field before. If I unhide it now, see that it's just a blank column. I've used it for what I want to use it for now, but it's not useful anymore as a column on this field. So that's where you can now hide. I don't even have to go back here. You can also click on a column and then you come here and hide. It's the same thing. So which brings me to some of the things that you see here. There are a couple of other things you can also do. And one of those things is now, one of the interesting things is that this header part of your schedule, you can customize a schedule to add your company logo, add other information that you want. So you can't do that on this place that has parametric information, which is automatically updated. But at this header part, Revit allows you to now do a couple of other things. So when you are within this area, you see that if you check the columns and the rows, you can insert things. So I can, for example, insert a row below the selected one. So now Revit has added a blank row that I can now begin to add other. These are not parametric information, more or less, that automatically updates, but it allows you to add more things. For example, here, I can choose to, from this category now, I can begin to add project information. For example, what is the client of this project, right? So these are things you might want to add to your, on your schedule. Let's say I add NIQS, for example, that's the client. You can even, so the interesting thing now is that this is not typed here. It's not just for this schedule. If you go back to the manage tab and you check, this is where the information is coming from, project information. You check now, you notice that this thing I just typed has updated. This is a client name. It has changed it to NIQS. So this is the way Revit works. You're not working in a schedule. You're working in a BIM model that is bidirectional. Anything you change somewhere, you update anywhere. If I come here now and I change this to, let's say, NIQS Abuja or something, it will update on the schedule. So it's all everywhere around. So, and even on this place, because these are not parametric information, I can even merge cells. I can select these two cells now. And then if I go back to modify schedule and quantities, I can merge and unmerge and all that. So you can see merge or merge. If I click on this now, these two become one. So let's say this NIQS Abuja, I want it to just belong like that. For example, I can just, if I unmerge this guy now, I can merge these two instead. So you see that it reads properly. And even add a logo. So for example, if I come here now, you can see insert image. So if I have the NIQS logo, for example, now, once I click insert image, it will take me to my project browser and I can search for whatever the image is and it will import it into this and add it to your schedule. So imagine when someone look at the schedule, you can see the client name, you can see the company information, you can see maybe the project address and all those things. All those things can come from project information. For example, we have project address and even the ones that are not there by default, you can add them using the add parameter stuff that I talked about earlier. So you can populate, and all these ones to allow you to even, just like an Excel sheet. The parameter is here is now behaving like Excel. I can change the color. For example, I can put a shade in now, and then I change this to red. And now this is another talking about the formatting we talked about earlier. So if you look at this now, you see that none of this wall is up to 50 meters square. Okay, this one is up to 50. Yeah. Let me check the conditional formatting that I did. Conditional format area. 50. Yes. Yes, so I wanted to show the conditional formats I was talking about at that time. So what's I highlighted here now, you can see that these cells that are shown in red are walls that their area is more than 50 meters square. So for me to do that, what I did is to go to the formatting tab. If you click on that particular parameter, which is area, you can go to conditional formats And you can see what I just said is a condition saying that if the area is greater than 50 meters square, change the background color to red. So that's the way. Once I look at this schedule now, any cell that is showing red, it tells me that that wall is more than 50 meters square, the area of that wall. So this is where conditional formatting comes in. So basically up here, you can do a couple of other things. Some of those things we've already seen before, like the units, like we did for area, we did for 2 decimal places for the area, or the calculated parameter, combined parameter. And then if you're up here, you can also insert a column. You can, if you want to insert a column, that's basically no, it's come on. Yeah. Okay, so I was just basically trying to explain the tools, some of the tools that you find up here. Like I mentioned, well, you saw the conditional formatting. Okay. From the floor plan. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I'll show them. So up here, you see some parameters, some other things. You can insert a column, you can resize and whatnot. You can hide and unhide columns. You can insert rows. We can only insert row when you are working on this one that you added by yourself. You cannot insert a new row in this area that is automatically populated, because that's basically saying that you want to add a new wall. Like for you to add a wall, you have to draw the wall. You can't add a wall from schedule. So those are some things that you can't really do. And then of course, you can even delete elements from here, and it will even delete from the project. It will delete that wall. So you can even delete a wall from schedule. So it's also important to be careful. So it's important to be careful some of the tools you are using and what they actually stand for. So basically, that is the overview of some of the things. And then one last thing I wanted to show is some of this information. If, for example, all these parameters, you want to see the parameters from a floor plan, not necessarily from a schedule, you can also see them. If you click on this wall, for example, you see some read-only information, some read-only. Hello, can you hear me? Yes, just to summarize, one last thing you also need to know that some of these parameters that you see that are listed here, sometimes you don't have to create a schedule to actually, if you just want to know the information, you don't want to create in a schedule, you can still go back to a graphical view like a floor plan. When you click on a particular element, you see some read-only information. So if you come to dimensions here now, you see the length of this wall is read-only, you cannot change it. You can see the area, you can see the volume. So these are actually the information that Revit is extracting and showing you on a schedule. So it's also important to note that you can see the height of the wall. Some of those things are read-only, you can't change them. Then on a schedule, Revit will populate all those things and now put it in a spreadsheet format. So this is basically the same workflow. I think if time permits, I might still show someone's mic is on. I don't know who's that.
Okay.
Please kindly mute your mic. So at this point in time, I will allow you guys to throw in any questions that you have. After the questions, you have time, I might still show how to do a room schedule, because that allows you to embed a schedule into another schedule, which is the embedded schedule I talked about. So if you have any question at this point, feel free to either type it as a comment or mute your mic and ask a question. Yeah, someone asked, I'm seeing one question here from Priscilla. Yeah, I noticed that the architectural drawing used for the schedule was designed using Revit. Cannot is a BIM software, a 3D software. Like I showed you, the information is coming from the 3D model. Revit cannot extract quantities from a PDF file. You have to model it. So the only thing you can do is if you bring in AutoCAD file into Revit, you can use that AutoCAD file to generate the 3D model. But Revit basically extracts the information from the 3D model. If you don't model that element, please mute your mic. I don't know whose mic is making all this noise. Is there no way to mute? Darabasi, please mute your mic. So what I'm trying to say is you cannot work that way in Revit. If you bring in AutoCAD file into Revit, you have to use it as a reference to generate a 3D model. So is that intelligent information that you have in your 3D model is what you're extracting into a schedule. If you don't do that, it's basically at the time you spend putting that information that will give you an accurate schedule. If you don't put in all the information that you need into the 3D model, it will not come out to a schedule. So I think.
Let me also say something. The quality of schedule you produce is a function of the details you have, in the model. So generally, before you start to work as a quantity, before you start to work on a particular model, you have to check the level of information contained in that model. Unfortunately, there's a software called Solibri Checker. That's Solibri. If you apply that Solibri Checker, you'll be able to know the quantum of information you have in the model. The more information you have in the model, the more you can achieve in generating your schedule. And as you can see, you see this BIM is developed by an American company called Autodesk. So you find out that even to generate quantities, unless you go to schedule, the thing is hidden. Why did they not say bid of quantities there? Because in the US, they even have what you call cost engineers, not necessarily quantity surveyors. So as a quantity surveyor, we want people to know, but you say Waqsn is only trying to introduce this to you. You can't learn everything about BIM in 2 hours. The software is loaded, but the important thing is that yes, he has shown you all the various platform. Sections there. The architectural. If you were to go through the architectural section, we will not leave here today because that is his area. If a structural engineer were here today, he will spend another maybe 1 or 2 hours. So, but the section that concerns us is the schedule, and the schedule. I think he has done. He's not a quantity surveyor, but he has done as much as he could. And let's not be afraid that architects will take a job from us. For instance, when he was talking about rate, he doesn't know the rate per square meter. Even when we're trying to generate what should go into the fields, I had to assist him. So we are still there as quantity surveyors. The challenge is that please, after this, update yourself more. Thank God you have what you call it, videos and so on. You have books, you have writers. So please, let's update ourselves. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Architect Oyema. But we actually got this feedback from the participants that the way you are taking the training is as if they are already in tune or they know about the Revit software.
And I'm sure more than half of anyone on this participant call, we don't really know how to use it. So it's, I don't know. The impression and the feedback that we got is that they're not really feeling you at all.
Yeah, so like Dr. Fide mentioned, the thing is the workflow used to generate quantities in Revit is not the same that you find in other estimation tools like maybe the Plan Swift or even Navisworks, the manual way of generating quantities in Navisworks. So, and this is also why this thing is recorded. To generate quantities in schedules, you are more or less working with an existing model. So you are going to be more or less acting as information manager, inputting all those information into the model. And it's as much information as you put into the model that you are able to extract from that model. So I understand that the workflow is a bit different from what you guys already are used to, but if you're able to still go through the recorded video and watch it a couple of times, I'm sure that it will begin to make sense. You can also begin to practice it on your projects. And like Dr. Sam mentioned, if you're not familiar with the Revit environment, it's not likely that you fully grasp this in 2 hours. It's something that is a different workflow. But the truth is, when it comes to BIM, the way BIM is that it's a collaborative environment. Everybody is working together, and that workflow is just a bit different from the traditional workflow, whereby you have to bring in a CAD file and begin to trace over it and begin to extract quantities. So, and it's just because of the difference in the workflow that makes it sound abstract. But the moment you go through this and practice on a few projects, I'm sure that it will begin to make sense. And these things are also the same way it's done across the globe. If you're working on international projects, or if you want to get some projects outside the country, it's expected that you also understand how this whole workflow works. It's just basically the same process. If I'm able to summarize, one thing to take away from everything I've said today is that when you open a Revit model, you go to the View tab. From the View tab, you go to the Create panel, and then from here,
Hello?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Okay.
Yes, sorry, the network. So I wanted to say that even if you don't take anything away from everything I've said, I know that I said a lot of things. You also know that for you to generate quantities or create schedule in Revit, when you get a BIM model, ideally you're not the one to even create the model. You are basically adding information to the BIM model. If you go to the View tab, you go to the Create panel, then you click on the Schedules drop down. Most of the time, you'll be creating schedule and quantities or material takeoff. Both of them, the interface is the same. If you click on schedule and quantities, you now select the category of elements you want to. If you want to generate a wall schedule, you choose wall. If you want to generate a window schedule, you choose window. If you want to generate a floor, roof, whatever kind of schedule, you choose that category. Once you're choosing the category, depending on the category that you choose, for example, if I choose window now, for example, the parameters I will see here is a bit different from what I will see when I created the wall schedule. So this is now the parameter. So I understand that the workflow is different from what the typical quantity surveyor is used to. That's why it sounds abstract. But once you understand that you are basically extracting information from a BIM model, and what you see here are the parameters in that BIM model, which is what you have here under fields. Every other thing here is like working in Excel. Do you want to filter off some things? How do you want to arrange that information? How do you want them to show up on your schedule? How do you want the final schedule to look like? The important thing is understanding that these are information from the model that you've received, and you are extracting that information and putting it in a spreadsheet format. And then, like I showed earlier as well, sometimes you might still have to open the model itself and add those information if they are not there yet. For example, this wall now, or let me say this furniture arrangement that I have here, if I want to create a schedule for it, and I don't have the manufacturer information on this, as a quantity surveyor, you might have to add those information yourself. If you go to identity data, you see manufacturer. So sometimes what's like Dr. Sam mentioned is that in those other countries, you're basically a cost manager. So you get a model and you begin to add those information. It's as much information that you add into this model that you're able to now extract using a schedule. So if you now go to the View tab, you say schedule and quantities, you now choose the category and the parameters that you want to extract. That's basically the summary of the entire workflow. But I don't expect that if you're not used to Revit environments, that you understand Revit in 2 hours. Revit is a cumbersome software. I've been using Revit for about 10 years, and I'd not learned Revit in 2 hours. So no, that's the truth. Now, I'd not learned Revit in 2 hours. It takes experience, it takes practice before you actually grasp it. So I'm not surprised that people say that they're not following or they didn't grasp most of the things I said, but it's recorded. If you're able to go through the video and watch it and practice it, more importantly, if you practice it and follow the step-by-step process and it's on 1 or 2 small projects, it will begin to make sense. And interestingly, if you possess the skill now, you kind of stand out from most other quant surveyors, because a lot of quant surveyors, they're not used to the Revit environment. They don't know how it works. And it's not just a Nigerian, it's something that is a skill that is needed globally. So I think, okay.
Okay. Hello, sir. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, we are far eating into our other time, and I don't know how else we can undo this this situation. The heads will just be going back and forth. So is it something that we can drop on the chat and you can take it off from there? Maybe after people have been able to watch the recorded video. So I want to employ QS Stanley that the video, maybe in another 1 or 2 hours, should be dropped on the WhatsApp platform, so that when people go through it, I'm sure we'll have more questions to ask. And then maybe we'll take it off from the chat room and we'll address it before we go on the next lecture.
Okay, can I add something?
Will that work, sir?
Yes, sorry. The video, we'll get it first from NIQS, and they usually do some editing before they send it to us. So it depends on how fast we get it from the NIQS.
Yeah, so we'll work on them. I'm sure QS Priscilla will be able to work on them to do fast with it.
Yeah, if we get it today, then we make it available on YouTube, because we notice they were not able to download it from the Zoom link that we get from NIQS. So we give them a YouTube link, which will be easier for them to.
Yes, that was very, very creative. It was very good. I think I prefer the YouTube, and somebody has just dropped a chat that the YouTube one will be better.
Yes.
So we'll work on the national tool before QS Priscilla, so that they will send the recorded video before the end of today. It's Alisu there.
He's listening.
Then that plateau window cut a pieces for inside.
Okay, Mr. Luis.
But the yam very small yam.
Mr. Luis.
Please, let's mute our mic if you are not being addressed, please. It's clashing.
Yeah. Please let me add 1 or 2 things. This BIM, during the first lecture, we said it's a combination of softwares. And we said the most popular combination is Revit and Navisworks. Thank God, on Saturday, we are going to have Navisworks. Now, Navisworks is linked to Revit. Most of the information we use in Navisworks are from Revit. Now, and in Revit, the issue of preparation of bill of quantities is more robust than the Revit platform. Like I've said, if you check Revit very well, Revit is mostly for generating schedules and approximate estimates. But Navisworks, you can generate bill of quantities. If we are patient, if we are attentive on Saturday, we'll find out that one of the resource persons will be able to show an example how Navisworks can be used in generating items using BSMM4. So please, I invite everyone to be there on, Saturday for the Navis Wars. But like Chair said, we'll do our best to make sure that the video is ready by the close of business today or first thing tomorrow morning. And when you go through, once more, whatever questions you have, you can ask, in form of chat. And we are here, even after the training, we are there, for your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ofide. So I think we'll call it a day right now, and we'll meet on Saturday by the grace of God. And hopefully the video will be up by the end of today. The Salisu is there too. So I'm sure we'll do all he can to help us pass it on to QS Stanley to do the needful. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll see you on Saturday by God's grace. God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. So many questions, but I don't know. I believe.
Hello, thank you very much, everyone. Nice to see you guys.
Please, Mom, and not forget to send the recording. Thank you very much.
Vamos, guys, vamos. Okay, I'll leave now. What's really done? But I won't leave now. I'll just leave. We go around 12. 1 hour we'll read them. Abi? 1 hour will come back, then 1 hour will. That's everything altogether 3 hours. Buy go buy it. Carry the money for pocket too. Because it is all just come for Lagos. Don't carry the 10K for pocket. Just so that if buy you won't buy. You go say, too much just come for Lagos. Too much they loaded though.
Why check out? How do I know? Leave.